It is indeed a matter of great pleasure to host this event on the occasion of 158th birth anniversary of Maharishi Aurobindo on the theme Sri Aurobindo on Indian cultural heritage. First of all, I'd like to welcome the dignitaries in dais, our esteemed Pradeep Bhai, under whose dynamic guidance and blessings of the Mother, Sri Aurobindo Society is working on many dimensions, and regularly we are organizing the events under its dynamic leadership and support. I would like to welcome today's chief guest, Madam S. Chandira Priyanka ji, the Honorable Minister for Art and Culture, Government of Puducherry. The Honorable Minister for is also the Minister for Transport and is the beloved daughter of the late former Minister, notable leader of Pondicherry politics, Thiru Chandira Kasuji. So, on inspiring her father, after stepping into public life in 2011, Madam Chandira Priyanka is engaging in various social activities for 5 consecutive years. She has made her mark on a variety of platforms such as women's empowerment, medical camps, blood donation camps, women's education, and child right protections. On behalf of Sri Aurobindo Society, I would like to welcome you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and joining for today's event. I would also like to welcome Sri Prasad ji. Due to some unavoidable circumstances, he is not able to join today's program. And we have among us Madam Sunena Mandim ji, who is the co-founder of Pondicherry People's Heritage, PPH, and Pondicherry, and playing an important role to promoting Pondicherry's rich and cultural heritage. Before we proceed further, I would like to request our esteemed Pradeep Bhai to kindly felicitate our guest. I would also request Pradeep Bhai to kindly felicitate Sunena Mandinji, please. Thank you, Pradeep Bhai. May I request Sri Pradeep Narang, Chairman of Sri Aurobindo Society, kindly present his introductory remarks, please.
Madam Priyanka, Honorable Minister for Art and Culture, it's been a really great joy to have you with us. And we have known your background, and we look forward to welcoming you to our place. For us, this is a very important year. It's the 150th anniversary of Sri Aurobindo. And much has been happening all over the world during this period, and especially in Pondicherry, which is his Tapo Bhumi. Today's symposium is based, that deals with this subject of Sri Aurobindo's cultural heritage. So what Sri Aurobindo has written about Indian culture is really an ocean. And he has written about Indian culture of different dimensions. And it all started because the question arose that is India civilized? And in answer to that question, he began to write and came out with this great book called Foundation of Indian Culture. The name seems to have been changed, but I remember this as Foundation of Indian Culture. And all that has to be known or written about Indian culture is there encased in that book. You pick up that book and you can't put it down. Starting from the definition of what culture really is, you just can't put it down. And today you're here with us, Madam. It's a great honor, because you're doing so much work in the field of art and culture. And today we have with us some excellent speakers. I know for a fact, because I have listened to them. Mantri Prasad, who is a professor in the Center of Education, who was specially invited today to join us here with us. And today he would have been with us today, but he unfortunately got the flu, which all of us are getting these days. So Matre decided to fall ill yesterday. Hence, he is not here today. So I'm going to pull his leg as to why did he could not delay it by another day. And he could have had him here today because he's a great speaker. He's a great speaker. And he was in fact telling me the other day when he was talking to me that by accident he became a teacher. I said, Matri, but then all of us who have come to the mother have been by some accident or the other. We never planned it. She decided that you come here. And each one has an experience to tell as to how she came to Pondicherry and why she came to Pondicherry. Most of us don't know why we came to Pondicherry. But in hindsight, we realized exactly what our destiny is and what she is planning for us, and hence we came here. It is, Pondicherry is a very, very rich culture, and you are heading that portfolio, which is a very, very good thing for us. Sunena here with us is in the forefront of many dimensions of Pondicherry's life, and she's a great warrior. I've known as a warrior who fights for Pondicherry's rights. And I saw her for the first time performing in the Secretariat before the Chief Minister. I don't know who the Chief Minister was at that time. And as to what this Chief Minister should do with Pondicherry. Which was, putting in blunt terms, she had a whole blueprint as to how Pondicherry can be improved. And I was sitting here watching her. I said, this little girl is really quite a warrior, and many people were sitting there, many ministers and everything, but none spoke up to contradict her in any way. Because they all believe that what she's saying is right. The other day, again, we were at a discussion going on the phone. So I just asked her, I said, why don't we have a proper airport in Pondicherry? She said, what are you going to do with the airport? So many tourists are coming here, we don't know how to handle them. And you're talking of a bigger airport. So I said, I probably have my priorities wrong. But I believe that they have, finally land has been granted for this airport to Tamil Nadu government. And some money perhaps will come from Delhi to fill up Pondicherry with tourists whom we can't handle. So the other day we were having a meeting here, and the gentleman, an IAS gentleman, was here with us. So I said, the least that we could do is to somehow or the other manage the traffic of tourism that is coming. It's impossible to handle. You may have more hotels, you may have more restaurants, but then there are too many tourists, no place to park. Of course, these questions are all accepted but not answered. How are we going to handle it? I really don't know. Okay. Madam, you would perhaps know better because you know the other side of it and what the problems are over there. But Pondicherry needs great deal of support. And it has so much potential, cultural, spiritual, that you name it and Pondicherry has it really. So ma'am, you're welcome, and I'll ask Kishor to take over from here.
Thank you so much, Pradeep bhai, for your inspiring words. May I request the Honorable Minister to kindly say a few words in this occasion, please.
Vanakkam. How are you all? God bless you all with the blessings of Mother. Sri Pradeep Narang, Chairman, and Sri Tripathy, Secretary, Dr. Kishor Kumar Tripathy, Member Secretary. This is Sunaina Madin, co-founder, speakers of Symposium on Sri Aurobindo on Indian culture heritage, have wrote something. And this is what I just want to convey this. It is really an auspicious occasion for all of us as the entire nation, celebrating the 150th year of birth anniversary of our Sri Aurobindo, the Indian nationalist, philosopher and yogi who propounded divine life on earth. As a nationalist, Sri Aurobindo created a national-wide awareness. Sri Aurobindo has mentioned, Puducherry is my place of retreat. During his 40th year in Pondicherry, he involved a new method of spiritual practice, integral yoga. Maharishi Aurobindo and Mahakavi Aurorbharati had a good relationship. They developed the spirit of patriotism. I'm very happy to know that Sri Aurobindo Society is celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo with a symposium on topic Sri Aurobindo on Indian culture heritage. I'm very happy that learned speaker will share their valuable ideas on this important subject. But I'm so happy to be here. I would like to say few words in my mother tongue. Thank you for that. Because we are all here for portraying our culture. So my culture is my language. So I must speak in my language. Thank you. I don't know எத்தனை பேருக்கு இங்கே தமிழ் புரியும் அப்படின்னு எனக்கு தெரியல. பட் எனிவேஸ் மேடம் ரொம்ப நான் பார்த்தோன்னா ஐ தாட் தட் மேடம் ரொம்ப அழகாக தமிழ் பேசினாங்க. அவங்க என்ன என்கிட்ட சொன்னாங்கன்னா வந்த உடனே நான் நீ பிறக்கிறதுக்கு முன்னாடியே நான் வந்துட்டேன் இங்கே. ஸோ அதனால எனக்கு நல்லாவே தமிழ் தெரியும் அப்படின்னு சொன்னாங்க. பெட்டர் நான் லாங்குவேஜ் கற்றுக்கிறதுக்கு முன்னாடியே தமிழ் லாங்குவேஜ் கற்றுக்கிட்டாங்க. ஏன்னா நம்மளுடைய ஸ்ரீ மகாரிஷி அரவிந்தோ அவர்கள் as a politician, I just want to share few things. என்ன அப்படின்னா காங்கிரஸ்ல திலகருக்கு அப்புறமா அவரை கட்சியை பொறுப்புல எடுத்துக்கணும்னு சொன்னப்போ இல்லை எனக்கு என்னுடைய ஆன்மீக பயணம் தான் முக்கியம் அப்படின்னு சொன்ன ஒரு மனிதர். அரசியலையும் தாண்டி அரசியல்வாதியாக இருந்தாலும் இன்னைக்கு ஆன்மீகமும் அரசியலும் வேற கிடையாது. அதை ப்ரூவ் பண்ணிருக்காங்க எங்களுடைய ஆனரபிள் சீஃப் மினிஸ்டர். ஏன்னா ஒரு ஆன்மீக பாதை அது அத்தனை பேரையுமே நல்ல வழிக்கான ஒரு பாதையாக அமைக்கும். அது அரசியல் இருக்கிறவங்க ஆன்மீகத்தில் போனாங்கன்னா they will definitely do right thing for the people. ஸோ அதுதான் ஆன்மீக பாதை அப்படின்னு நான் நினைக்கிறேன். ஸோ அதை அன்னைக்கு அரசியலை தாண்டி நமக்கு கற்றுக் கொடுத்தவர் ஸ்ரீ மகரிஷி அரவிந்தோ அவர்கள். அதே மாதிரி நம்மளுடைய புதுச்சேரிக்கு வந்ததுக்கு அப்புறமா இன்னைக்கு புதுச்சேரி அப்படின்னாலே ஒரு அடையாளமாக இருக்கிறது ஸ்ரீ அரவிந்தோ அவர்கள் தான். இன்னைக்கு எல்லாருமே இங்கே வரணும் அப்படின்னு நினைக்கிறாங்கன்னா வந்த உடனே அரவிந்தோ ஆசிரமம் அதை பார்க்கணும் அப்படிங்கிறது. எனக்கு தெரிஞ்சு அரவிந்தருடைய அடையாளம் பாண்டிச்சேரி கிடையாது, பாண்டிச்சேரியினுடைய அடையாளம் அரவிந்தர் அப்படின்னு தான் சொல்லணும். அந்த பெருமை எங்கேருந்து எங்கே பிறந்திருந்தாலும் எங்களுடைய கவிஞர் ஒருத்தர் சொல்லியிருந்தாருல, யாதும் ஊரே யாவரும் கேளு அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி இதெல்லாம் பாருங்க, எங்கேருந்து பிறந்து எங்கே வளர்ந்து இன்னைக்கு எங்கே இருந்திருக்கோம் அப்படிங்கிறது. இது ஒரு புண்ணிய பூமியாக மாறுறதுக்கு காரணம் நம்மளுடைய மகரிஷி அவர்கள். அந்த புண்ணிய பூமியில நானும் பிறந்திருக்கேன் அப்படிங்கிறது எனக்கு பெருமை அளிக்குது. உங்களுடைய சொசைட்டிக்கு இதுதான் திஸ் இஸ் மை ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் ஐம் ஹியர். ஸோ ஐம் ஸோ ஹாப்பி அண்ட் ப்ரவுட். இந்த ஒரு நேரத்தில் என்னை அழைச்சதுக்கு ரொம்ப ரொம்ப சந்தோஷமாகவும் மகிழ்ச்சியாகவும் ஐ ஃபீல் எப்படி சொல்றது பிளஸ்ட். இந்த மாதிரி நிறைய விஷயங்கள் எனக்கு பிளஸிங்ஸ் அப்படியே கொட்டும் அப்படின்னு சொல்லுவாங்கல்ல, அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு இவ்வளோ வெயில் வெளியில் அடித்தாலும் மழை மாதிரி நம்மளுடைய அரவிந்தர் அவர்களுடைய அந்த ஆசீர்வாதம் நம்ம அத்தனை பேருக்கும் கிடைக்கட்டும். ஐ திங்க் இந்த மேடையில் நிறைய பேர் ஆண்களை விட பெண்கள் அலங்கரிச்சுட்டு இருக்கீங்க. அந்த மெம்பர்ஸ் ஆர் ஸோ ஹாப்பி தட் ஹாப்பி விமென்ஸ் டே அதையும் சொல்லிக்கிறேன். அட்வான்ஸ் ஹாப்பி விமென்ஸ் டே. ஸோ அத்தனை பேருக்கும் என்னுடைய வாழ்த்துக்கள். பேசிக்காக உங்களுக்கு என்னை விட பாலிடிக்ஸ் பற்றி கேட்டால் நிறைய சொல்லுவேன். ஸோ கடவுள் நம்பிக்கை மட்டும்தான் இருக்குது, அரவிந்தர் மீதான நம்பிக்கை மட்டும்தான் இருக்குது. ஸோ நெக்ஸ்ட் டைம் ஐ டெஃபினெட்லி ப்ரிஃபர் சச் நிறைய விஷயங்கள் ப்ரிப்பேர் பண்ணிட்டு என்ன, ஏன்னா பிகாஸ் திஸ் த மை ஃபர்ஸ்ட் டைம் இல்லையா. ஸோ அதனால் கண்டிப்பாக அடுத்த வாட்டி நான் நிறைய ப்ரிப்பேர் பண்ணிட்டு வரேன். ஸோ இன்றைக்கி வந்து ஹோப்ஃபுல்லி நீங்கள் எல்லாருமே யூஆர் ஆல் ட்ரெயின்ட் அண்ட் ப்ரிப்பேர்ட் சம்திங் இல்லை. ஸோ அதனால் நல்ல முறையில் இது நடக்கட்டும் அப்படின்னு கடவுளை பிரார்த்தனை பண்ணிக்கிறேன். தேங்க்யூ ஸோ மச். ஜெயந்த்.
Thank you so much, madam, for your inspiring words about Sri Aurobindo's vision and your great passion for this land and its cultural heritage. And we are working on different dimensions of Indian art and culture. And we have also a deep passion to explore the intangible cultural heritage of this land. And thank you so much for sparing your valuable time and presenting beautiful ideas about this land. Once again, thank you so much. May I request Madam Shulena Mandinji, she is taking a leading role in Puducherry to promoting its cultural heritage. To the Pondicherry's Heritage Festival, the 9th edition is going on, and it's like a festive celebration actually. In Puducherry, many events are going on. So I request Shulena Mandinji to kindly say a few words on this occasion.
I always start any announcement I make. I always start with Vanakkam, Suprabhatam, and bonjour, because it's a four lingual place we have, with Tamil, Sanskrit, English, and French. Honorable Minister Pradeep ji, Kishor ji, thank you for inviting me to talk about the festival. But before that, I wanted to just say something. When I think of what inspires us to do the festival, it's 3 things primarily from the teachings of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And incidentally, today is also the 55th anniversary of the inauguration of Aurobindo. So the first one is from Sri Aurobindo, a sentence which is very dear to my heart. It's from the Life Divine. It says, "For all problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony." And if we make that the guiding principle of our lives and everything we do, we can solve any problem. So that's the first thing. The second thing that touches me and I think is very important in terms of the heritage preservation work that we are trying to do is the concept of beauty. Now, when I look around the room today, particularly at all the women, I'm so glad to see the wonderful traditional clothing that we are all wearing, and I mean, respecting beauty is extremely important. And India is a land of beauty traditionally, and somewhere we have lost it. And for us to regain it is an extremely important thing. The mother has very strong words on this, and I'd like to read them out to you. "It is one of the greatest weapons of the Asura at work when you are taught to shun beauty. It has been the ruin of India. The divine manifests in the psychic as love, in the mind as knowledge, and in the vital as power, and in the physical as beauty. If you discard beauty, it means that you are depriving the divine of this manifestation in the material, and you hand over that part to the Asura." So, one of the very important points that we try to portray through the Heritage Festival is highlight the beauty of everything that has come down to us, all the wonderful riches that have come down to us. And the heritage that we celebrate starts with the natural heritage, what the Creator has created, and then the spiritual heritage, and then the cultural heritage in all its aspects: culture, dance, art, music, every daily habits, the daily habits of putting water in front of our house and then putting the columns, right from that to the flowers we wear in our hair, everything, all of that. And finally, it comes to the built heritage, what we as human beings have created. The third thing that comes to mind, and the Heritage Festival represents that very much, and that is what the mother wanted very much to happen, and that is why, that is one of the reasons for her creating Aurobindo, is to work collectively. There is a quotation of hers which I found last night. Way back in 1912, she was asked, what is the most useful work to be done at the present moment, in May 1912. She mentioned 4 points. The first 3 concerned the individual. And the 4th point, she said, was collectively to establish an ideal society in a propitious spot for the flowering of the new race, the race of the sons of God. And later on, she had given guidelines on how can we work collectively. When we have to work collectively, it is always better to insist in our thoughts, feelings and actions on the points of agreement rather than on the points of divergence. We must give importance to the things that unite and ignore as much as possible those that separate. Even when physically the lines of work differ, the union can remain intact and constant if we keep always in mind the essential points and principles which unite, and the divine goal, the realization, which must be the one unchanging object of our aspiration and works. And this is what we do in the Heritage Festival. This is what we do in working with the government, working with other people, networking, experts. Try to work collectively towards the larger good that we all want to see manifest in our lifetime as much as possible. And the Heritage Festival came about totally spontaneously when the Mary building collapsed in December, at the end of November in 2014. Now, maybe your birth was registered in the Mary, my marriage was, and many other events like that happened in the Mary. In fact, the very first, there was an exhibition at the beginning of when Intact was created, which was held at the Mary. So a lot of things have happened in that place, and to see it collapse, I think just shook everybody. It's like, yeah, we want our heritage to be preserved and conserved, but somebody else does everything. So it's always someone else who is responsible. Where is our responsibility coming? So somebody was we were all very concerned, and we started communicating with each other among friends, what can we do? And Kakuli Banerjee, who's in Delhi, who's not here today, she is co-founder of the People for Pondicherry's Heritage. She just put out a Facebook post saying, meeting at Gratitude Heritage on Romero Street on 5th December afternoon. And when I showed up there, I thought I'll find all people that I know and who think like us. Well, there were 35, 40 people, most of whom I had never met before or seen. And they all responded to this Facebook post, and they all came there and they said, yes, let's do something. So what can we do? So there was a very dear friend of ours, part of our Alliance for Good Governance group, Mr. Hemachandran, a secretary from the Pondicherry government. He said, let us call ourselves the People for Pondicherry's Heritage. And that's how we became the People for Pondicherry's Heritage. And then some friends from Madras, including Mr. A.C. Muthaya, who had the Chennai musings, and several other people, Deborah Tyagarajan from Dakshina Chitra, and they said, why don't you do a festival? I said, festival? We don't know anything about that. Well, this thing all happened in December, and at the end of February, we had our first Pondicherry Heritage Festival for 3 days. And it was a huge success. And right from day one, the Pondicherry government, Department of Art and Culture and the Tourism Department have been our partners and have participated. And for the first year, I remember the well-known actress and director Revathi. She joined us, and we had a very traditional welcome inauguration with a huge big drum at the Gandhi Tidal, and Telugu dancers dancing on the beach road and everything. And I don't know how we managed to put it all together in 3 days. It all happened. That shows collective working. We had no idea where the money was going to come from. We invited all kinds of very important people from all over the country. Even there were some people who came from France. And they all came on their own. We offered them hospitality and they gave wonderful talks. And at the end of the festival, on the last day, when we were thanking everybody and all that, it was at the Maison Colombani, which is now something else on the Rue du Mans. Somebody said, yeah, what will you be doing next year? And we said, next year? So, no, this has to go on. So we said, okay, there's one thing missing from this year's festival. We did not include natural heritage. So, from next year, we will include natural heritage. And then it just happened one year after the other. We are now in our 9th year, and we are 1.5 months festival. And we have partners. It's still a totally volunteer, spontaneous thing. You know, by August, people start saying, shall we start planning? It's about time. And then everybody goes to sleep, everybody is busy with their own lives and their work and everything. And then suddenly, oh yeah, shall we do this? Shall we do this? And then, even though the organizers are 3 organizations, or one collective and 2 organizations, they are organizations made up for just less than a handful of people. So it's working collectively that we end up managing to do whatever we do. And people just come forward and they have the total freedom of organizing their own events. Just today, the person who's written a book on trees of Pondicherry within the town, he's already doing a tree walk. So he told today, he sent me a message today saying, I want to add one more event, is that possible? So go on adding. Whenever possible, late at night, I am updating the program calendar and uploading it wherever possible. So I'm making, and Kavali is making posters and sending them, and people are putting in their events. So he wants to do a sketching event. So there are so many different events that are happening this year of all kinds, and we are once again so happy that the Sri Aurobindo Society is once again our partner. They have been partners, and then in the middle, I think everybody gets busy with their own thing, and then now suddenly, in a very big, significant way, they are our partners, and everyone on their own is organizing all these events. And then at the same time, we have the Water Festival, in which also we have the same partners, and the partners for all these years have been essentially the same. You know, hardly anyone has dropped out. Some individuals have dropped out, but people are, the institutions who are our partners, they continue being partners. Individuals come, individuals go, depending on their own constraints and everything. And somehow we lost touch with the art and culture department since the last few years. Now seeing her here, very happy. So from this year itself and next year very much, the art and culture will be very much a part of it all. And the theme for this year's Heritage Festival is responsible tourism. And on the last day, the 15th of March, the last day of the festival, we have organized a round table at the Alliance Francaise Auditorium, and I invite all of you and the minister as well to be a part of this. The roundtable speakers are going to be the person who heads the Incredible India, the India Tourism South, who is a Pondicherryan, Mr. Farooq. Then Priyadarshini, the Director of Tourism. And then there is Jose Dominic, who has been awarded responsible tourism and all that just recently. And there is Dr. Satish Nalam, who wants to bring in the health angle. He is the president of the Alliance Francaise, but he has ideas on how. So the whole idea is to see how responsible tourism can happen. And it is a responsibility that has to be taken up by the government, that has to be taken up by Pondicherryans, experts, and all the tourists who come here as well. So it is again a collective effort that's required. And if we create beauty within our town, people will hesitate to throw things. I mean, we all know, that if you paint Lord Ganesha on the wall, that wall is never going to be soiled. Similarly, if we have good lighting, we have beauty around, the power of that beauty forces us to respect it, to enjoy it, and not to mess it up in any way by throwing bottles or whatever. So this thing, what we hope is, this is going to be a long session with strong audience participation after their initial presentations are done, where we would like to come up with as big or as small a blueprint of even just a few points of what is it that all of us can do together towards this responsible tourism. So that's how this festival is going to end, and I think we have wonderful speakers who are now going to talk about Sri Aurobindo and cultural heritage. So thank you very much, and I would encourage all of you to be a part of the Heritage Festival as much as possible.
Thank you, Sunena Mallinji, for presenting the history and the glorious journey of Pondicherry Heritage Festival, which has continuing its 9th edition. Today is also a very auspicious day for all of us. Today is Auroville's Foundation Day, the city of the future. So when we were planning for the events for the Pondicherry Heritage Festival, we just thought to have a small symposium to celebrate this auspicious occasion. The special emphasis on Sri Aurobindo on Indian cultural heritage. This is an important topic, and today we have eminent speakers who will be sharing their valuable ideas. Before we start, I would like to say 2 lines. Sri Aurobindo, in his writing Savitri, he has written, "There is a book of being's index page. The text and glossary of the Vedic truths are there. The nature's correspondence with the soul are written in the mystic heart of the life." He says the secret code of the history of the world. When we refer to the Indian tradition, we find it is multicultural, multifaceted, and it has created an interdisciplinary approach and intercultural understanding. There is a saying in Sanskrit also, Bharatasya pratishthe dve Samskritis tatha. If you want to really establish the glory of this land, culture plays an important role. And Sri Aurobindo has written he has discovered many of the important aspects of Indian culture through his writings, the secret of the Veda, the hymns to the mystic fire, essays on poetry, the Upanishads, and the Gita also. Many things he has explored through his insights. He also writes that, I believe that the Vedas to be the foundation of the Sanatana Dharma. I believe it to be the concealed divinity of Hinduism. But a veil has to be drawn aside. A curtain has to be lifted. I believe to be the knowable and discoverable. I believe the future of India and the world to depend on its discovery, on its applications. Speaking on this great tradition, Sri Aurobindo is also presenting his ideas in the Vedic seers. Let's quote, "The seers of ancient India had, in their experiments and efforts at spiritual training and the conquest of the body, perfected a discovery which, in its importance to the future of human knowledge, dropped the divination of Newton and Galileo. Even the discovery of the inductive and experimental method in science was not more momentous." Unquote. So these are many important aspects Aurobindo has mentioned on these directions. And today we have 4 eminent speakers. Mr. Lalit Verma, he confirmed for this event, but due to some unavoidable circumstances, he has sent his recordings. Before we start the proceedings, I would like to introduce Dr. Lalit Verma is the founder, curator, director of several art, music, dance and literature festivals, twice the president of Alliance Française. He did his schooling and graduation from the prestigious Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education, Puducherry. With several years of experience in the corporate world, he founded the Aurodhan Art Galleries and many cultural events and Center to promote excellence. He was honored by the Indian Prime Minister in 2007 and also by the Director General of UNESCO, Paris in 2009. Presently, he has part of many of the events including Pondicherry Heritage Festival, PLF, FFSC and PTC. He received several awards including the Lifetime Achievement Award by the Chief Minister of Pondicherry and the Vishwaratna from Paris. So he has submitted his presentation on sharing heritage. We have among us Dr. Belu Mehra. She is a senior academic mentor and the editor of Renaissance magazine, which is being published by Aurobindo Society. Dr. Belu Mehra has a PhD in Educational Organization and Leadership from University of Illinois, USA, and has extensive experience of teaching, research, and guiding scholars at higher educational institutions in both USA and India. She has worked in the area of Sri Aurobindo studies since 2007 at Sakar and Sri Aurobindo Society. Her most recent book published by Sri Aurobindo Society is titled Understanding Contemporary India in the Light of Sri Aurobindo. Dr. Beludi will be speaking on the topic Fundamentals of Sanatana Dharma in the Light of Sri Aurobindo. We have Lakshmi Jyoti Siji. She is a third generation followers of the mother and Sri Aurobindo. Her grandfather, Sri Ramalu Manapragada, a leading lawyer and correspondent of an Oriental college, had darshan of Sri Aurobindo and the mother and contributed towards spreading their message in Andhra Pradesh. All her family members are deeply connected to the Sri Aurobindo ashram. She is particularly deeply interested in the sociological, cultural and political thought of Sri Aurobindo. She has studied these areas extensively and given talks on various topics at Sakar. She curates and regularly writes for Sri Aurobindo's action journals and designed as well as organized their workshops and concerts. She will be speaking on life and spirituality, the Indian view. We have one more eminent scholar with us, Dr. Shruti Bidwaikar. She is a scholar focused on Sri Aurobindo's writings on aesthetics, literature and culture. She is holding a master's in English literature from Ferguson College and PhD in English literature on Sri Aurobindo's aesthetic from Puducherry University. Dr. Shruti has published more than a dozen papers in the fields. She has to her credit book reviews and forwards to the books written to Sri Aurobindo's vision. She is currently associated with Sakar as the Assistant Director and looking after the research and program and dissemination activities. She will be speaking on the unity in Indian art. I welcome all the 4 learned speakers of today's celebration. So we will start with the presentation by...
just to butt in, the Minister just mentioned that she had some urgently called out. She will be leaving the meeting soon. So it's perfectly all right, madam. I know you're very busy. But it's very nice of you to have come. And I can tell you that you have made a big presence over here. And come again, please. And actually, we would like to interact more with you. But since you're tied up today, but again, there'll be future opportunities and we must meet again. And thank you so much for coming. I think before we start, I just had one particular question. Since we are discussing the Pondicherry and the issue came with the issue of the cultural heritage of Pondicherry, etc. There's a lot of talk about the smart city. Everybody was very happy when Pondicherry was declared as the smart city. So we didn't know what was coming really, How smart are they going to become? And what does smart stand for? What is the definition of smartness? And And even included after a great deal of debate that Pondicherry would be a part of. So the Home Minister was here last April, and at tea I asked him this question. I said, sir, what about this smart city? We are looking forward to this smart city. He said, smart city is a highly misunderstood concept. And he said, some people think that if it is computerized, it becomes smart. Some people think there's going to be some beautiful road, then it becomes smart. Some people think that the per capita income rises, the city becomes smart. He said, the picture is not clear as yet. And all these things are important, and all these things will come into the picture, but the job is so massive that it's going to take quite some time. So, since you're at it, I'm saying, on the 15th of March, you'll have a final thing on it. There's one issue that really has to be thrashed out. Because there are some cities where there are some signs of smartening up a bit, or at least cleanliness, or more control on the population, etc. On the hygiene aspect. Something that needs to be discussed, since you are going to have this final session on the 15th round table, raise it. Once, if you remember, there was a lady who was the tourist secretary, tourism. She got a meeting of all the guest houses and hotels that you please discuss. We discuss how to encourage tourism. So the letter I wrote to her was that we don't have to do anything, just get rid of the mosquitoes. And you'll find more tourists coming in. Because the mosquitoes repel tourism. But my point is, nothing really has happened. So, and here is where the government has to step in, collaboration, part of it, etc. So if you could, since we are discussing this issue, before we go into the deeper aspects of culture, as Sri Aurobindo has pointed out, I think we as here at least pass some sort of a resolution, we must do something about this.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be here to share a few thoughts. Just at the outset, I want to say that every time I have an opportunity to speak anything about what Sri Aurobindo or the Mother have said on any topic that they have touched, which is pretty much anything. They have shared their insights, their light is on each and every aspect of life, not just culture. So anything that I would share, like recently I heard a friend say that the copyright is with Sri Aurobindo or the Mother, and the Mother, it's one and the same consciousness. So we just have our, privilege, honor to bring their light, their words among friends. So that's all. It's no idea, no perspective, no thought, nothing from us originally, but it's all their light that we are privileged to bring in different ways. So when Kishorji had shared with me about this symposium, I said, okay, give me a day, I'll think of a topic or something. And just the very first thing that came to me was to share a few things about Sanatan Dharma. Because if we look at what Pradeep Bhai said earlier, Sri Aurobindo, in that book, The Foundations of Indian Culture, that was the original name of the book, which later is renamed as The Renaissance in India and other essays on Indian culture. The very first thing that strikes anybody who reads that book is the unique way Sri Aurobindo defines culture itself. And he speaks of culture as the expression of consciousness of life, which reveals itself in three important ways. And then he uses the same analogy as how we understand the human experience, the human existence: soul, mind and body. Soul, mind and body of the culture. So what is the soul of the culture? the people's highest aspiration, the highest thought that they can reach at, that is what constitutes as the soul of culture. The people's scientific, aesthetic, all kinds of accomplishments that come from the ranges of mind, from mind to the highest ranges of the mind, that is the mind of the culture. And the way the people organize their outer life, outer systems of socio-economic, political organization of individual and collective life, that is the body of a culture. So when I was thinking about as to what I would like to speak on, the immediate thing was, why not just speak a little bit about the soul of the culture, the highest that the human collective, the Indian collective people have, arrived at, the psyche, the highest thought, and naturally that is Sanatana Dharma. So what is Sanatana Dharma? Most of us grew up thinking that Sanatana Dharma, or what later came to be known as Hinduism, is not a religion, but a way of life. And Sri Aurobindo, with his characteristic wry sense of humor at one place, writes that yes, it is a way of life, but what kind of a way of life? Which can involve the highest ranges of yoga to murdering your neighbor and taking everything that he owned and say, this is also a way of life. So we have to understand what is this way of life that we understand as Sanatana Dharma. And Sri Aurobindo, people say he's difficult to understand, but I think he's very easy to understand because he's the most organized, systematic writer there ever is. You cannot find a gap in his argumentation, in his analysis. So when writing about what is Sanatana Dharma, Sri Aurobindo has given such comprehensive understanding, actually listing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. So I've only collated here few of those fundamentals of Sanatana Dharma in the light of Sri Aurobindo that I will share. So the very first thing is, we cannot not talk about Sri Aurobindo and Sanatana Dharma without bringing in the first time ever that he publicly spoke about his inner life, his inner experiences, and that was at this Uttarpara, where he was asked to give a speech, the event was organized by a group of people for the protection of Sanatana Dharma. And Sri Aurobindo had some idea what he would like to speak, but obviously when he gets up there, the mother, the Bharat Shakti, has some other ideas and something else comes out. And he says that this is what I have been asked by the divine to speak to you. And that was, in that speech, you find a very important point that he speaks about what is this Sanatana Dharma. So I'll just read few lines from that Uttarpara speech. This is the first in volume 8, which is the Karma Yogin writings, the very first text that we find today. When it is said that India shall rise, it is the Sanatana Dharma that shall rise. When it is said that India shall be great, it is the Sanatana Dharma that shall be great. When it is said that India shall expand and extend herself over the world, it is the Sanatana Dharma that shall expand and extend itself over the world. It is for the Dharma and by the Dharma that India exists. So this is the soul of Bharat, soul of India. Without Sanatana Dharma, there is no India. Without India, there is no Sanatana Dharma. This is also really true. This is why preservation of Indian culture is so important for the future of humanity, because in world's future, humanity's future depends on what is true in Sanatana Dharma. And in the same speech, he goes on to say, what is this Hindu religion? Why is it called Sanatana Dharma? And again, nothing better than his own words. That which we call the Hindu religion is really the eternal religion, because it is the universal religion which embraces all others. No ifs, no buts. point straight, frank truth, absolute truth. If a religion is not universal, it cannot be eternal. So, it's not a matter of chauvinistic pride that we call Indian religion as eternal religion, but that is the fundamental truth of any religion. If it has to be eternal, it has to be universal. Any sectarianism, anything that is true today, not true tomorrow, cannot be eternal. Anything that is true for some and not true for others cannot be universal. So there have to be some absolute, eternal, timeless truths that are part of this, what we today know as Sanatana Dharma, or the eternal way, or the eternal religion, which I will, as we go along, hopefully that will come to light. But another important point, which I have not mentioned it here, which is also part of this same Uttarpara speech, is when Sri Aurobindo asks a question, why is it called Hindu religion? Is it because people of this land, the Hindu land, that have preserved it? If it is that alone, it cannot be universal. He says it is called Hindu religion because people in this land were given the special charge to protect it. But it is not confined to or, limited to this land. It is applicable to all. It is universal because it speaks of universal truth. And one of the truths that it speaks of, there are many truths, but one important truth that I am highlighting here is the last sentence there. It is the one religion which does not separate life in any smallest detail from religion. It's not that only you go to your place of worship on this particular day of the week, rest of the week you can go on killing your neighbors or do whatever. Every detail of life has to be done in the religious way. And that is one important characteristic of Sanatana Dharma. Sri Aurobindo lists many. It is one religion which alone has the ability to synthesize all the advancements that are yet to come of science, physical science, material science, and has a way to integrate with the inner life. And it is one religion that has the ability to integrate truths of every other religion, regardless of not whether those other religions will tolerate the process of assimilation. He speaks about that. But Sanatana Dharma itself has the capacity to integrate within everything. So these are again from that Uttarpara speech. Another key characteristic of this Sanatana Dharma that Sri Aurobindo has highlighted in his writings is something called as self-enlarging system of spiritual culture. So religion is not, in this view of Sanatana Dharma in life, is not something separate from culture. Everything that we today know as Indian culture emerged from what was there in Sanatana Dharma, or what is there in Sanatana Dharma, or rather what will be part of the Sanatana Dharma, because there is also an evolving aspect. It is eternal and yet it is evolving. So this is another important characteristic. There is universal eternal truth, and there are truths that are also evolving and self-enlarging, self-expanding. So a few other words that I've highlighted there: vast, many-sided, unifying, and always progressive. No retrogressive or backward-going tendency, always looking to the future. Free, tolerant synthesis of all forms of spiritual worship and experience. And another very interesting aspect of Sanatana Dharma in the light of Sri Aurobindo is that yes, there are many smaller categories or cults or divisions within the fold of this self-enlarging system called Sanatana Dharma. All of them may have their own unique name. But Sanatana Dharma itself, this self-enlarging system of spiritual culture itself, chose not to give itself any name. There is no name. Hinduism is not the original name. It's an adapted or co-opted name like that. So it remained nameless, formless, universal and infinite. And because it is nameless, formless, universal and infinite, the only name that can be given to it is that it is eternal and it is simply a way. Sanatan Dharma. Dharma is actually literally not religion. The literal translation of dharma is that which holds, which gives a way. So it's an eternal path, eternal way. Eternal, something that holds the cosmic order together. So dharma is a derivative from the word rit, which means the right cosmic order. That which maintains the right cosmic order in an eternal way is Sanatan Dharma. That way is Sanatan Dharma. So this is another important insight that we get from Sri Aurobindo. And yes, also nameless, formless, universal, infinite, because it had only one seeking, that is the Brahman. What is Brahman? At one place Sri Aurobindo said, India, he could have even used the word Sanatan Dharma there, gave to the world or gave to the humanity that science could not. And then he lists three things. As I said, very systematic writer he is. Brahman for the ultimate goal. Dharma for the only way to live. And yoga as the means towards the goal. Simple three things, but the entire Indian philosophy, entire Indian culture is summarized in one sentence. So, yeah, he's not difficult if we find the right key or if we start to love him. In a very interesting writing, I don't have the right reference here. This is actually, I think, one of his letters, early letters, where Sri Aurobindo speaks about that there are two Hinduisms, or two, the narrow way of understanding Indian religion. He uses terms interchangeably, Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism, and also another word that he uses, Indian religion, which actually incorporates not just today what we know as Hinduism, but also Jainism, Buddhism, Sikh Panth. All the Panth, the ways that emerged from the Sanatan Dharma family. So at one place he speaks about that there are two ways to understand what is today popularly understood as Sanatan Dharma or Hindu religion. One, which is a religion of the kitchen table, and one which tries to seek for God. So in his words, one which takes its stand on the kitchen and seeks its paradise by cleaning the body. This is the outer religion, only concerned about the purity of what I'm cooking in the kitchen. Has the person been, had gotten the right samskaras to cook in my purified, sanctified, consecrated kitchen? This is the kind of religion that is concerned about, have I purified outwardly my body to be able to cook? Is the woman menstruating or not? Can she cook or not? Those kinds of questions. This, he says, is a very, very narrow version of the Hinduism, which is concerned about what is being cooked, how it is being cooked, how it is being served, with whom I am sitting next, is the person of the right upbringing, right samskaras and things like that, with whom my daughter is going to be married, or all kinds of, kundali matching and all that kind of thing. And then there is another Hinduism which is concerned about seeking God. Beyond the convention of the kitchen table and the cooking pot, it is concerned about the soul. It's a beautiful piece of writing. He speaks a lot in detail about, so the first kind of Hinduism is concerned about, he says, Kriya, Achar and Shastra. So Kriya is, the rituals, the breathing pattern, this, that, things like that. Shastra, what is there in the scripture. Achar is how to conduct the life. But the deeper Hinduism is concerned about karma, jnana and bhakti. The deeper Hinduism is not saying that, the outer conduct or the outer rituals are not important, but it understands that they're just means on the way. They are not the final thing. So the progression has to be from the lower to the higher. But Sri Aurobindo, being Sri Aurobindo, will not be satisfied even with this distinction. He said even the higher version can be understood in two ways. There again, one is more concerned about one aspect of the divine. My Ishta Devata, my Guru, my chosen path is the best. Others I will accommodate because I am Hindu, or I will accept because I am Hindu. He says that's not, again, the final thing. That's a very narrow experience. The ultimate soul's experience is where within my own Guru, within my own Ishta Devata, within my own chosen path, my soul finds a way to assimilate every other Guru, every other path. That is the highest of the Hinduism, the highest synthesis. So one is still sectarian. Shiva, not Vishnu. Ram, not Krishna. Arey Baba, from Ram you have to evolve to Krishna. That is how the truth of Sanatan Dharma is. You cannot stay stuck with Ram Bhakti because eventually Ram itself will take you to Krishna's Bhakti. That is how the experience of a lot of people takes you. Parshuram himself withdrew into the background when he realizes Ram is on the scene. That's how our journey has been. So again he talks beautifully about this. Within the higher Hinduism there can be sectarianism. My path, my Guru is the only Guru. Still not satisfied. Still we have to go deeper. What is truly the essence? After all this analysis, Sri Aurobindo still goes on to talk about some essential fundamentals of Sanatan Dharma. So a lot of people say Hinduism or Sanatan Dharma is the only religion which cannot be fundamentalist in nature. And when I came across first time this particular passage of Sri Aurobindo where he describes he uses the word fundamentals of Sanatan Dharma, and I said if we can all follow this fundamentals, I will be, proudly say I am a fundamentalist Sanatani. If we can actually live through these principles, live through these fundamentals. So there he describes Sanatan Dharma as an immense, many-sided, many-staged, open framework. And this is the key for spiritual self-building and self-finding. These are the two goals that Sanatan Dharma puts in front of us. Self-building and self-finding. Who we are or what we are, and how do we build our lower self to eventually arrive at the highest self possible. And I was thinking this morning which picture to go with this, and I don't know, this made a lot of sense to me. This is the Kailash temple in Ellora, and it took 100 years to build this, I won't call it a temple, it is a temple, it's a cave temple, but it's actually a piece of sculpture because it's all carved out of one rock from top to bottom. It's not a structure that is built from bottom up, and it has multi-storied balconies and the whole, you can walk around the whole sculpture. So it is many-sided, many-staged, open framework. Walking through Kailash Nath Cave Temple is like walking through the ins and outs of Sanatan Dharma. That's how I felt this morning. So what are the three fundamentals that Sri Aurobindo speaks of? Very simple, one existence, many names. From the Veda itself, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Whether it is Agni, whether it is Yama, whether it is Matrishman, Varun, Mitra, whichever deity, from the Vedic deities to the Puranic deities of Vishnu, Shiva, Rudra, Brahma, or the Shaktis. Many names, one Sat, one existence. This is the first fundamental of Sanatan Dharma. Sri Aurobindo explains this in greater detail when he says, when Indian mind emerged from this understanding that there can be many names and forms given to that one absolute of the illusionists, or one permanent of the Buddhists, or one existence of the Veda, or the one without a second of the Upanishads. Indian mind at the same time never felt the need to eliminate the many forms. And there he goes into greater distinction between how is Indian pantheism not same as Western pantheism, how Indian polytheism is not same as Western polytheism. In the interest of the time, I'm not going into greater detail, but later on, if there is interest, we can speak about that. But these are important distinctions to understand. One existence, many names does not mean that many is less than one. Each of those many is just as one is represented in each of the many. So one and many at the same time. This is the first fundamental of Sanatana Dharma. The second is that if there is one eternal, one absolute, one without a second, there is no one way to attain that one. There are as many ways as number of people in this room or number of people on this planet. So there is a manifold approach to that one eternal, one infinite. Whether it is through science, through art, through dance, through music, through cooking, through whatever way you want to attain that one, you have the freedom to do it, as long as you are able to do it with a certain attitude and with a certain goal in mind, which is self-finding and self-building of the individual. And then, of course, there are greater details. But the psychological truth that this particular fundamental is built upon, this idea, is that each individual is different temperamentally, and depending on one's swabhava and one's stage of inner evolution, that freedom has to be given. So we each approach that form of the one which is suitable to my swabhava and my capacity, my adhikara. So those psychological truths are also built in there. And the third fundamental finally is that the same one, that same one existence with many names and forms is not only accessible through the outer work, but that one can also be found within me. And Sri Aurobindo speaks of this third fundamental as the most dynamic truth of of Sanatana Dharma, because it is as individualized as each one of us is. So we don't even have to invoke Mitra or Varuna or Rama or Shiva or whatever. We can find that one, that eternal, that infinite, as a spark within ourselves. So these three fundamentals, of course, he does not just say it in 1, 2, 3 points like that. He gives beautiful descriptions of that. But these are the three fundamentals that if we can all aspire and live along these lines, we can, all of us, be fundamentalist Sanatani, and the world will be a much, much better place. I'll just end with this last part. I've just kept it short so that, just dropping hints, and if there are questions, we can take them up. So if there are only these fundamentals, then what is this elaborate outer form of Sanatana Dharma, or rather forms of Sanatana Dharma that we see all around? And Sri Aurobindo at one place uses a very interesting word to explain all that. He uses the word scaffolding. Just like when you have to build a building, you need scaffolding to support till the structure is ready. Exactly in the same way, unless we are ready to build the temple within us, unless the psychic within us has emerged as the leader of our evolutionary march, unless the temple of the spirit is ready, because human psychology is so complex, only Sanatana Dharma recognized that each part of our psychological makeup needs its own satisfaction. The intellectual part needs philosophy, needs explanation to satisfy itself. The aesthetic part needs all that beauty, all the form, the ritual, the ceremonies to satisfy itself. The emotional part in us needs the joy of bhakti, the joy of viraha, from the joy of separation from that God. So the songs, the kirtans, all that kind of thing. And the psychic parts need that peace and calm of the meditation. Each of these is a scaffolding as a way for us to grow in closeness with that spirit, with that one which is the object of our seeking. So all the outer ceremony, ritual, all that we see outside as form or forms of Sanatana Dharma is nothing but scaffolding. But without scaffolding, building will not stand. So preserving the outer form becomes important simply because within the form, formless exists. And there's a beautiful poem of Sri Aurobindo where just titled Form, which is the perfect explanation of the why Murti Puja. He's written a lot about it, but you read the poem, you don't have to read everything else. Why form is sacred? Because formless lies in the form. So each and every form, when he's talking about manifold ways to approach the form, because in each finite there is a possibility of seeking and finding the infinite. So hence finite is just as sacred, as worthy of preservation and conservation as the seeking of the infinite. So these are few of the fundamentals of Sanatana Dharma that I thought I'll bring to light. So I hope I have done justice to the topic, but I wanted to keep it short. I hope I haven't gone beyond my 15-20 minutes. I didn't time myself. So I'll pause here.
So thank you, Dr. Belu Mehraji, and for presenting one of the unique topics, the Sanatana Dharma. So if a religion is not universal, it cannot be eternal. So in Sanatana Dharma, the main focus is to dissolve in the Brahman. So we will start the next presentation by Lakshmi Jyoti Ji.
Sabhaya Namaha. Thank you, Belu. That was very beautiful and sets the right background for us to take forward the topic. So this topic is life and spirituality, the Indian view. It's always a joy to speak about Indian culture and the words of Mother Sri Aurobindo. The two today being the special day, the Aurobindo Day, and that too in Sri Aurobindo Society, an organization dedicated to the Mother's works. I think all that we can say is from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for this presentation, for the opportunity of making this presentation today. Now, life and spirituality. In Savitri, Sri Aurobindo's epic Savitri, when Satyavan meets Savitri, he says, I looked upon the world and missed the self, and when I found the self, I lost the world. So here I am, when I look into myself, what is this world? I'm not able to maintain this connection with the world. And when I'm in the world, in the life outside, or even the cosmic consciousness, I seem to be losing my transcendental self. The link between the finite and the infinite. So what is this life and spirituality? Is there a paradox in it? If so, what is the key? Satyavan, luckily, he seems to have found the key in Savitri. So let us look at what Indian culture tells us about this key between life and spirituality. For the last millennium and even more, Indian culture is dominated by the interpretation of Jagadguru Adi Shankaracharya. And we know that he was a Mayavadi. He said all life was illusion. He had his own historical, sociological, maybe even spiritual reasons for saying so. For that period, the life energies were completely depressed, and the whole concentration was attaining the moksha, which is the ultimate. So in this case, perhaps the life energies were not given their due. But Indian culture did not start with Adi Shankaracharya. It was there even millennia before that. We speak of the Vedas as the foundation of Indian culture. So let us look and see what the Vedas seem to be saying as interpreted by Sri Aurobindo. Now Vedas, what are Vedas? The Vedic hymns, the hymn to the Surya, hymn to the fire, hymn to the Bhudevi. They are all, the physical powers which you see with the naked eye. But then we also know today that beyond this physical representation, there is an inner world in most world. In fact, Vedas speak about Sapta Lokas. There are 7 levels of consciousnesses if only we are initiated into them. But look at this way, the sun, the physical sun, you propitiate the physical sun. He not only gives you the warmth, the heat, all that is required for the agricultural produce, considering Aryans were agriculturists. But invoking the same Surya, he even can open you up to the inner spiritual meanings. That means here the matter is connected to the spirituality. They are very beautiful. The highest spirit, which is the highest sun, the highest spiritual knowledge, is beautifully connected to the very matter. If we take a story of Bhudevi, what is Bhudevi? Bhudevi is the earth, the unconscious part. This Bhudevi, when she finds that there's so much destruction happening on the earth because of the asuras, what does she do? She invokes Vishnu, the highest consciousness, to come down, take the avatar. So within this earth, we call her a goddess, there is a consciousness. And Sri Aurobindo explains this very beautifully. He says, we speak about the evolution where the earth or the matter has become the plant the animal, and animal, of course, we have man, and beyond man, the superman. But all this happened because before this there was an involution that happened. The Brahman consciousness or the super consciousness that had decided, for whatever the reason, to constrict and become slowly the inconscience. And the same inconscience now is trying to find its way up. So as per the Vedas, all this is nothing but one supreme consciousness pervading right from the, whether you call it patala, inconscience, earth, whatever, to the top. Only thing that is required is a slight turn maybe of consciousness within us, in the sense, open up the inner consciences. When you open the soul or the psychic, as Sri Aurobindo puts it, what happens is the reversal of consciousness. And when that reversal happens, we understand, we experience all this as a single unified consciousness. So that's what was found in the Vedas. After that, you come to the Upanishads. Upanishads also say, Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam, the whole, you call it matter, you call it life, mind, the supreme, the topmost levels, everything is made up of Isha. So even Upanishads, they are synthetic textbooks. And then the Bhagavad Gita also, if you see, the works, he says, he says, do the works, because works are the means to reach the divine. But once you have attained the divine, works again become the means of expressing the divine in the world outside. So he never said, akarma is never non-work. It only means detachment with work, not to have that detachment. And the detachment also is the inner detachment, sannyasa. Sri Krishna never said sannyasa, okay? It is the inner detachment that is important. Now if we look at it, we see the 4 necessities of human life as per Indian culture given by Sri Aurobindo. I think it's time for all of us to decide whether we are really Indian or not, because he says they are the necessities for any Indian life. So what is the first one? The first one says belief in the highest consciousness. So if you have to say what is Indian way of living, like Velu was saying, a way of life. Very interesting. Recently one judge passed, this judgment says don't mix up. It's only a way of life. What is the way of life? Are you following these four fundamentals, the four necessities? Then you can say it is Indian way of life. The first thing is to believe in the highest consciousness, and this has been imposed on us in every twist and turn of our life. When a baby is born, we do a puja. You want to name the baby, we do a puja. You want to send the baby to the school, the child, you do a puja. So every turn of our life, this has been imposed wonderfully by this great genius rishis. They evolved a system where we know as Indians that there is this highest consciousness. Fine, beautiful, the highest consciousness is there, wow, but what is to be done? We as individuals have to attain that. Hello. Don't stop with that, okay? You have to attain it. You have to train your life in such a way that you can attain that. Use your will and knowledge. That is the life for Indians. In the initial stages, the life is a preparation for reaching the ultimate. And then the third, he says, there are several disciplines for it which are suitable for your own swabhava. How beautiful. It's not like all of us follow one book, all of us follow one way. We have 3 crore devotees, gods and goddesses, they say. According to our soul nature, our swabhava, according to the way our adhara is prepared, we choose any one of these disciplines, but we have to choose. You may be married, you may be in pursuit of money, your desires, whatever, but do not lose this goal. Please keep remembering, ultimately, that is where you have to be following. And the last is very important, because these rishis, they have included even the last rung of human being with a very physical mind, who is not supreme, not a very capable person, but just happy, concerned with his immediate physical life and environment. Even to him, they said, if you prepare yourself, even you can reach the highest. And they have set up a beautiful social and economic structure. We will come to see it in the next slide. But before that, let me give you one, analogy, if I can say so. Let us look at what happened to Greek civilization. You know what happened? We all know Greek civilization in its prime. It was the model for the entire Europe. It was Europe's aspiration, that civilization. But what happened to that? It was restricted to the elite. They were happy. They were so enlightened. They were happy, progressing and doing what they want. But around Greek, we know it has the city-states. But around this, little bit of the circle of the elite people, you had the barbarians living. There was no knowledge transfer that happened from this elite to these barbarians around. Ultimately, what happened? The barbarians, when they became restless, they remained as barbarians. They came and they attacked and toppled the elite. Even if these barbarians were very impressed with the elite culture, it would take ages for them to learn what this group of elite have done. And today, the scenario is that wonderful civilization is lost. So here in India, it is really, we have to give it to the genius of our rishis for having come up with a social structure that included even the lowest rank of person. And he was told that even you can participate, even you can prepare. And we know there are many saints who have come from lower ranks, from the Shudras also. So this life has never been ignored or depressed by the Indians, the ancient Indians. Now if you look at the triple quartet, I'll try to be a little faster. 3 of these things, which are part of the social structure we are talking about. The first is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. We are very much impressed with Maslow's needed hierarchy theory, the Jungs and the Freuds, but all this is there in our own wisdom millennia back. And what did they say? They said karma is the very neater desires, small desires in man. And they said, and our people said, have it fulfilled, there's nothing wrong about it. Then Artha is a little more expanded, desires. Maybe you want to earn money, you want to have some fame, you want to take up some art or something. Then comes dharma, when the mind is developed, the concept of right and wrong, and finally moksha. That is how they, stages have been given in the evolution of man, the way he has evolved as a human being. But they always put dharma in the beginning, because they said, even when you are in the pursuit of your karma or the artha, remember there is a dharma that has to be followed. So there was not much of disorder. It's not like you can indulge. Okay, they said, I can have my desires fulfilled. Only then I'll be able to go to the next stage. So let me do whatever I want. It was never like that. There was always a dharma. Then comes the next one, the varna ashrama. Here I would like to say, varna, as many people think, is not the color. It is to choose. You choose your... we call them caste system, the class or whatever. We choose this depending upon our own soul type, which is our svabhava. Maybe if you are in pursuit of knowledge, you become a Brahmin. If you are in pursuit of... So all these, it goes till the Shudra. The Shudra is the man who follows the physical. But even that Shudra can become a saint if he wants to. I love these stories from our Puranas. Let us look at one story. The story of the Kaushika Mahamuni. Or, when this Kaushika Mahamuni, he was just sitting in the forest and meditating. What happened? There was a crane on the top which dropped on his head. He was a Brahmin. He was a Maharshi. And he was so angry. He was meditating and this crane had to drop. He looks up and it becomes ashes. Then perhaps he repented, we don't know about that. Then after that he goes to Bhikshatan. He goes to one of the houses and he asks a Bhikshatan, and there is this house lady, the housewife. She takes some time before she comes and gives it. Then he again gets very angry. He said, you kept me waiting. And you know what this lady said? She said, excuse me, I have some duties at home. I am not a crane. You cannot look at me and make me into ashes. I have my husband to take care of. I had some duties. I finished. I tried to do it fast, finished, and today I'm here giving you what I wanted to give you. And he was shocked. He said, how did she know that a crane, like he made a crane, into ashes? Then he asks her. Then she says, you want to know more about realization? Go to Dharma Vyada. Who was this Dharma Vyada? He was a butcher, Vyada. He was a butcher. So this Maharshi, this Brahmin, had to go to this butcher and then ask him, hello, please tell me the secret of this higher consciousness. So, this was India in the ancient days. There was no distinction. It was all based on what is your capacity. It was later on in the Middle Ages, all these, unfortunately, we don't know, as we realize today, much of our history has been suppressed. Then the third one is again a beautiful setup where Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyasa. Brahmacharya, you go to the Gurukul and have your education, and once your education is over, you are asked whether you want to continue in the ashram, lead spiritual pursuits, or you want to go and marry, just like our ashram school over here. Once you finish knowledge, you are given the choice. Either you join the ashram or you want to get married and go elsewhere. And then Grihastha is again, of course you can get married, you can have your desires fulfilled, but there is a dharma. There are some duties towards the society, and you are made to realize that, boss, you are preparing yourself for a higher consciousness. Please keep that in mind. And then Vanaprastha. How beautiful is Vanaprastha? Because we don't have the problem of in-laws. In Vanaprastha, what happens? These people, when they come to a certain, when they realize that the younger ones are old enough, they give the reins to the younger ones, and these rishis, they could look forward into what would have happened. No, my plus will not. Anyways. So you see, Vanaprastha is where they move away but still give their guidance to these younger people. So these younger people had the freedom and still have the guidance. Then finally came sannyasa, where they went away into the forest, not to be killed or eaten up by animals. But in those days, all the ashrams were in the forest. So they went to these ashrams to prepare for the next birth. They realize, okay, I have spent this birth in Grihastha Ashrama. Now can I prepare for something higher in the next birth? So that was the beautiful system which gave an opportunity for everybody. It is not necessary that all of them have to follow all these levels. Anybody, spiritual freedom was one of the important characteristic of Indian culture. Spiritually, you always had the freedom. Maybe in society, the conventionalism, you didn't have much freedom. But spiritually, you can join any sect, you can go away from the house, people will only treat you with respect. Take my word. And then, yeah, these are the four distinct characteristics which we need to look at. Well, anybody asks you what is the main feature of Indian culture, we're all very joyed. We say spirituality, it is the master key. But what is this spirituality? It is the spirituality which realizes beyond this physical, there is something more, something lots which is there. There are gods and powers. Beyond these gods, there is the Purushottama God, and beyond that, there is the cosmic transcendental, and beyond the life, there are several lives. Beyond the mind, there are several minds. All these our people could see, record, experience, and more. That was the kind of spirituality. It is not a monotonous pursuit of one single, nameless, formless, air or whatever. No, it wasn't like that. It was that absolute consciousness, which was again very diversified. So that was the spirituality which was in India. Then the second one, because our topic is life and spirituality, what was the life we had in India about this 1300, 1400 years back? Let me just read from there what Sri Aurobindo writes. When we read it, you can understand how much creativity has gone into this culture. He says, stupendous vitality, inexhaustible power of life, joy of life. And he speaks about creating abundantly, incessantly, lavishly, republics, kingdoms, empires, philosophies, sciences, creeds. I'm skipping. Monuments, palaces, temples, arts, religious orders, laws. You can go on reading systems of yoga. She created and recreated. And how can you say life has not been given importance in this culture? From where did this abundance, creativity come if it is not the life energy? And Vivekananda says all this creativity is actually an indication of the presence of a spirituality below it. Because this infinite creativity has to come from the infinite. And that is the spiritual presence which was there in this country, which was pushing forward to come out in these various forms. It was very much like this Indian, South Indian especially temples, where if you look at the brief, the base, there is no relief in the sculptures. Every nook and corner, you can go on gaping at these beautiful sculptures. Every nook and corner. And as it goes up, the unity, the aspiration, the unified aspiration goes up into the topmost consciousness. Isn't it? That's the beauty of the structure we have. But below, at the manifested level, spirituality seeks creation. It seeks diversity. That's why freedom is very important at that level. Now, I'm afraid, am I going beyond the time allotted to me? I'll try to make it as fast as possible. I just want to make one distinction. All this life is not a meaningless life. All this creation is not meaningless. If you take one example, comparing the Western sculpture and the, Oriental sculpture. Western sculpture, Michelangelo, let's take. What he used to do? He used to bring cadavers, dead bodies to the house. He used to cut them open and look, because he wanted to know where the muscle is placed, how the skeletal structure is, how the skin is. They are loyal to the nature. How does the human being look, and what's the best shape I can get out of it? But for us, if you look at the Indian sculptures, we have big bellies, we have 4 heads, so many hands. That is the sculptures you find. Why? Because we have taken the liberty in the form, because we want the inner essence to come out. That was the spirit of what had to be represented. Why should gods have 4 heads? For a man of a physical mind to tell him, you see, God is more powerful than you. You have 1 head, he has 4 heads. It is just to show that those are entities which are far more powerful than us. You have 2 hands, but they have more than a dozen hands. It is just to make us this man, this common ordinary man to understand these figures are much, much more capable and higher powers than us. So that is one distinction. So the third aspect is intellectuality, the third power. So here we spoke about the spirituality, then the vitality which was there, and intellectuality if you look at it. The Upanishads, the Shat Darshanas, the 6 systems of the philosophy, and the Shastras, the Dharma Shastras, the way it is codified, the way it was studied, they went into the details. They had a Shastra on horse breeding. They had a Shastra on cattle breeding. There was a Vimana Shastra. There was also the Kama Shastra. And they studied every bit of this aspect. The intellectual, wasn't it the brilliance of Indian culture, which would go into the nitty-gritties of all these Shastras. The 64 art forms were very deeply studied and codified and presented. So that was the brain that was present. And we can never say Indian culture was just about some navel-gazing spirituality in some words. No, there was so much of manifestation of the divine. And all this study, ultimately they all said, they connected these physical sciences to the ultimate. They said, boss, this is what it is right now, the way I study. But it leads to something, beyond it, the spirituality. Okay? And then let us go. The fourth characteristics, which I just said, here he speaks about the fine excess. When we took up an aspect, like when people said Indian culture was a complete ascetic culture, why did they have to say that? When Indian mind, the spirit or whatever, took one aspect, it went to the extremes of it, just to know its impact, how much of it. And then from there it came back. It went to the other extreme of it. We were thorough in our study and experience. And then it came back and looked for an equilibrium of the two. This fine excess had to happen because the limitations had to be broken and the spirit had to flow into them. But there was no disorder despite these extremes. Why? Once again, the fundamental concept was always this unity of consciousness. So when you look at all these aspects which were there in ancient India, can we ever say life was neglected? Life was not given its due? No. Our spirituality always took care of life. It rather manifested in the life. Okay, now we are all so wonderful, the glory of the past. Yes, we agree, the past was so great. What about now? What is happening now? But there is a revival which is definitely happening. And all this creativity, the abundance is going to come back, slowly taking place, and it is going to be on a much more greater plane. Sri Aurobindo says, in a greater way, all this is going to come back to us. He speaks about the Renaissance in India, and there he speaks in 3 lines. He says, the national mind turned a new eye on its past culture. It's a new eye. Awoke to its sense and import, but in relation to modern knowledge and ideas. Once again, when we speak about Renaissance in India, we have to think about Sri Aurobindo. This Renaissance, we can very easily say that started about 120 years back when Sri Aurobindo was actively there in politics. And the only parallel I can think of is Krishna in Kurukshetra. What did Krishna say? He told Arjuna, go and fight. The most violent battle, the physical battle, is a go kill your kith and kin. That's what Krishna said. And in the midst of all this, he revealed Bhagavad Gita. The highest, knowledge, the wisdom. He revealed that. And Sri Aurobindo, when he told India to fight for your political freedom, he was not, the life aspect was not being ignored. The external world is not being ignored. He said you have to fight. In fact, through his writings, he awoke the Shakti among the Indians, the youth, the way they woke up through all these samitis, those were established under the guidance of Sri Aurobindo. And these people, they woke up with their energy and they took charge of. And while this movement is going on, he spoke about the destiny of India as a spiritual destiny. And it is not spirituality like it was there until then. There was going to be an entirely new chapter in spirituality that is going to open up. And that's where India has to be awakened to its own self. And this new creation brought forward. He says 3 lines, of Renaissance. He speaks how it is going to come. The recovery of the old spiritual knowledge and experience. He said recovery of spiritual knowledge. Let's introduce Vedas, Upanishads in the school. We'll all get it by heart in the head. We'll give lectures. Oh, Veda is this. No, in experience. The new creation can only come when we go deep within ourselves. It's not enough intellectual understanding, and start living from there. Then what happens? This spirituality flows and recreates the form. The forms, the spirit remains the same, obviously, but the forms keep changing. New forms of philosophy, literature, art, science, critical knowledge, any problem. In the next he says, dealing with modern problems in the light of the Indian spirit, the dharma, the swadharma of the Indian spirit. It is not that we copycats, look at the European and say, oh, they did it and they seem to be doing fine, let's do it. And tomorrow they abandon that and they come our way. Then we also run back. We say, oh yes, this is there in my backyard. How foolish I was. So it is from our own dharma. We'll have to throw this new light and solve our problems. And then finally, yes, this is again very important, extremely important. This is long in preparation. What is it? It is a new thing in spirituality itself. He says, Indian spiritual mind has a double impulse. That double impulse is, so far all the spirituality we saw, it spoke about the ascent. From your physical to your vital to your mental, you are ascending to the highest levels of consciousness. You may call it moksha. But he says the possibility in the red, please, I'm reading the lines in the red, the possibility not only of an ascent towards the eternal, but of a descent of the divine consciousness and a change of human into divine nature. It is this transformation of the nature. It's the creation of the kingdom of heaven on the earth. It is this Rajyam Samruddhi which the Gita has spoken, which has to be established on the earth. The divinization of the very matter. That is the future of India, where of course life itself has to manifest the divine. There is no divorce at all. We don't need any key. There is no divorce at all. Life and spirituality have always gone hand in hand. And of course, one more point is, and India has to arise. The Renaissance is both for herself and the world. And here also, please mark the words in the red. He says, a force that is in many aspects unlike any other. India is a country unlike any other. And its genius very different from the mentality and the spirit that have hitherto governed the modern idea. We have a genius within us which is very much different even from the spiritualities of other countries and cultures. That is why India becomes the chosen land. That is where India can become the Vishwaguru. And when we speak of India as a Vishwaguru, it is not that India will start once again in its authority, but in a compassionate way. Sri Aurobindo, he has spoken about the coming of the subjective age. So the subjective age basically living from the inner contact. You are awake to the soul or the psychic within yourself and you start living from there. He said that is the age. From this rationality we are moving towards the subjective age. And as the subjective gets closer, it is imperative that the humanity comes together. There is no east and west anymore. Of course, India takes the lead precisely because of this mentality, this unique spiritual mentality, which it has been prepared for all this millennia. It does take the lead. And when we say subjectivity, once again, there is this true and false subjectivity. India can, like Germany, fall into the bit of a national ego. Sri Aurobindo, when he speaks about false subjectivity, it is also subjective. Our ego is also inside, it's subjective, but ego is not the soul. That's what happened to Germany. It was very beautifully in touch with its spirit, and a lot of things were happening. Then suddenly, when it came into execution, the fault lines appeared, and it started attributing all its genius to its force and its ego. Then Hitler comes forward and says, we want to, run around, everybody else, and it's we who want to rule the world. That is the ego. But here, of course, in India's case, the very stress is on that spiritual experience within. So when you move from there, obviously, hopefully, the chances are much lesser to get egoistic. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lakshmi Jyoti Sisi, for presenting your ideas on life. And may I request Shrutiji to kindly present.
A very good evening now. I'm grateful to Dr. Kishor Kumar Tripathy ji, Mr. Pradeep Narang, to have given me this opportunity to come here and share with my own family. Beluji and Lakshmi Didi, I know them very well. Sunaina ji, of course, we are all a family, but definitely, as Lakshmi Didi said and Beluji said, to talk about Sri Aurobindo, to read him itself is a joy. So every opportunity we get to speak about him is our own chance to read him much closer, because we can listen to him many times, but we ourselves don't delve deeper into his own works in order to understand certain things. So when Mr. Tripathi called me the other day to ask if I would like to speak, of course he had requested Dr. Anand Reddy, who is not well. So he recommended my name, and I was a little at a loss because I didn't know what I would be able to speak on. And but this topic, unity in Indian art, had been, I would say, bothering me for some time, because as very beautifully my previous speakers have brought in this idea that there is divinity in matter, there is this cultural heritage which we have to understand, which we have to take forward. So I have always been thinking as to when we go to any temple in India or any other place that we visit, and Sri Aurobindo has said so much, that the temple speaks to you, the monument speaks to you, the bas-relief speaks to you. What does it speak to us? And he does mention time and again there is a unity underlying it, which is very nice to think about and very easy to say when we are just giving a talk. But then I asked myself in my previous studies, I said, okay, I have said unity in Indian art. But then again, what is that unity? What are the pointers to identify that unifying factor? And earlier when I started studying, I found 3 cornerstones to which I'll come towards the end of this presentation. But to my amazement and joy, Sri Aurobindo has given different parameters defining this unity in architecture separately, for painting separately, for sculpture separately. I am calling them parameters, he doesn't call them, because he is writing in a flow, he wrote in a flow. And he is, of course, we know this Renaissance in India, his art criticism, his life criticism, everything, his literary criticism, everything we find in this book. But art criticism is something that's extremely fascinating. And Sunaina ji was speaking about the last day of tourism in which we could have something. I remember in one place Sri Aurobindo does mention that if we go to any of the Indian monuments with the eye of a tourist, it will not reveal anything to us. So we have to go with a meditative eye, we have to go with a contemplative mood to be able to sit in front of those monuments or bas-reliefs or carvings to be able to, for them to reveal themselves to us. So now Sri Aurobindo makes this beautiful statement in one of these chapters only, and he says, all art reposes on some unity, and all its details, whether few and sparing or lavish, and crowded and full, must go back to that unity and help its significance, otherwise it is not art. We can imagine this importance he has given to unity, the sense of unity in any work of art. And this, of course, he writes to a certain extent in terms of architecture, because from the Western critic, he completely banishes all Indian architecture as grotesque, as very overdone. So and because he says, the British critic says that there's no unity in Indian art, Indian architecture. And Sri Aurobindo point blank says that there's no unity, any structure for that matter, Indian or Western, cannot stand. And now in this definition, we have this very beautiful, any art, all art reposes on some unity. Now first, for our own minds, when we are making a piece of, a map or a blueprint, or just not even to the scale, just some drawing for our own house or our institution, there is a concept that we have, and that concept is the oneness for us, maybe not in terms of these big monuments. But when I was analyzing this myself, sitting, what is it that we do? We create a blueprint of something, and that's the first holding, that's the first thing that holds everything together, the art that is going to come. So, one more reason I brought this image here is I'll show you the next image. Because unity is not only emphasized in Indian art, unity has been greatly emphasized in Greek literature, Greek art, and all their works. But their definition of art, they have defined it very clearly, beautifully, and their definition of this unity is fairly different from what Sri Aurobindo says, or rather he builds on that further. So one of the things, if you can see, I'll show you the next picture and then we'll come to this. This one. So we see the characteristics of Greek architecture which forms the unity. There are tall columns, intricate details, symmetry, harmony, balance. Sri Aurobindo of course adds his own terms, but more or less they mean the same. So, well adjusted to the eye. Sri Aurobindo says well adjusted to the eye, well acquainted to the eye, something like that he says. So we find all these things here. In other figures also, if you see, we find the symmetry, the harmony, the balance, tall columns, everything we find. And now we go back to the picture that we had earlier chosen. So everything together and yet much more is there in Indian art. Symmetry, yes, to a certain extent, but there is variation. And this is where Indian art differs from the Western or the non-Indian art, I would say. I'm not clubbing it with Asian because I do not know, I have not studied that part of it. But Sri Aurobindo does mention this variety. You can see the first pillar has a different face and the second pillar has another face. So there is a relief, the visual relief, there is a variety, and there is a symmetry also. So this beauty, this order is not being broken by the variety. But that is the genius of Indian art. And that's where I feel so mesmerized when Sri Aurobindo says there is an underlying unity. Yes, we see it as one unit of a temple, as the pillars or the 100 or 1,000 pillars of a temple. We don't discriminate that this is a work of 500 different people and it is all scattered. It is not like 5 little children's writing and doing some painting and has been put up on the wall. It's not like that. It's a very systematic planning under which these things are being done. So there is one kind of oneness that we see in this is the architect who has planned the blueprint has given detailed thought to each of these pillars and they have been executed the way he had it in his imagination, or he had it in his intuition, I would say, rather imagination. So this is where we differ from the Greek architecture. Now these are all structural differences. So Sri Aurobindo takes 2 examples in his writings and he explains to us very categorically of how do we understand this unity in architecture. So we go to this Sri Kalahasti temple and this is of course 2 views. I'll show you why I've taken 2 views of this temple and the Simhachala temple. Both he said he had 2 pictures in front of him and in the previous one you will see Sri Aurobindo says, how do we understand this towering temple that is there? One is the view, its view with the hill around. The hill is tall, and if you see it looks as tall. And then in the next image you will see, it's almost looking as tall as the hill, although the hill is taller. So one thing is that he said you have to see it along with the surroundings. You can't isolate the temple from the surroundings. How much is it in harmony with the surroundings? So he says it is very much in harmony. Why, we will see, the psychological aspect we will see, but only the structure if we see. Another thing, it's only one structure which is towering, like the hill in the city. Central hill, if you see, that is the one only towering in the city. The temple also is only the one towering in the entire premise of the temple. And now we go to the previous one. Here, this is of course a night view. So, this is showing the aspiration. This is Sri Aurobindo who is saying, I am not interpreting it. He says this is where the nature's aspiration as a hill and the human aspiration as the temple tower is what we are seeing, the temple mounts that we are seeing. So the similarity, the oneness is in that complete vision where we see the nature's aspiration and the human aspiration coming together in the form of this architecture. So I think next time we see a temple, next time we visit a temple, we have to have that view. And then we will understand the heritage of our country. More importantly, because when I was previously studying these structures, not that I've done any architectural study, but more out of interest, I came to know that each temple, the height, the design, the amount of material that has been put, the expanse of the temple, all depended on the king who was making it, because it would showcase his prosperity, his extent, how much he was involved in this kind of a work. But that's a very, very kind of, I would say, political interpretation or important, definitely, but an economic political interpretation. But if we see from Sri Aurobindo's perspective, it is the aspiration which is the mounting aspiration of human and nature that is presented here. Now, he brings the similarity between this temple, which is the Sri Kalahasti temple, and the next one which I am going to show. And he says both have a structural similarity. As usual, a temple is broader at the base and it becomes narrower towards the top. But the next one is not as high as this one. So its base is larger and its height is much lesser. Now again, it is one with the surroundings there. There are no towering hills around this temple. The trees are higher and a little round like trees. So we see again the temple also is one with the kind of nature, the foliage that we have around. So that is again Sri Aurobindo's observation just from a picture that he had. And it was again marvelous to see how he brings out those two differences. And next time again, as we go and we see these temples, especially the South Indian temples, we'll be able to see what is there. Like if we go to Tanjore temple, I mean the expanse of it, like it's a sea city, so we see the expansion of the sea. I mean this Vangakonde Cholapuram again. Next to the sea we have that huge temple. So the expanse of the temple, I would say, is the expanse of the temple, the sea also we see there. So the three things that I found out for ourselves in temple architecture, especially in India, to be able to cherish and understand the next time we visit is the oneness around with the nature, the oneness with our aspiration. And another important objection that was raised by the critic was the overcrowding of the mountain, of the temple walls and the temple mounts. So many different figures, and what we do not find perhaps in the Greek architecture is the number of animals, the number of human figures, the number of non-human figures that we see on the Indian temples. It's astonishing. I mean, sometimes you feel, why this overcrowding? Why this, and especially when they color it, it becomes even more atrocious, I would say. When they're not colored and you see them, do we really see a pattern emerging? Do we really see that there is something that the architect wanted to tell, the sculptor wanted to speak to us about? Us, or maybe the visitor, the one who is going with a meditative idea to the temple, to the sanctum sanctorum, with some aspiration within. And there was an objection that this overcrowding, this over-lavishing of the temples is a distraction. That was from the British critic, the English critic. He says, it is a distraction. You people, if there was nothing made outside, we would have just gone to the sanctum sanctorum. Which again, Sri Aurobindo says is a mistaken understanding of our culture. Because what we are doing, there are again two aspects to it. One is that we go to the temple, we feel the awe, because the entire life, the physical and the supraphysical, is depicted on it. We are not restricted. Sri Aurobindo says at one place, maybe I'll read it. Yeah. Here you will see the teeming inexhaustible plenitude, where he says, the wealth of ornament, detail, circumstance in Indian temples represents the infinite variety and repetition of the worlds, not our world only, but all the planes. Infinite multiplicity in the infinite oneness. So this is again a very, something that we can sit and analyze, take each monument by monument and analyze what it is. But when I visited these temples, first you are almost awestruck by the creativity of human intuition, I would say. I wouldn't say hand or imagination, but human intuition, how much has gone into it. And at the same time, when there are certain stories we can't decipher, certain things we don't understand what those are, those faces, especially the columns that I showed you earlier, they are all the supraphysical creatures, they are not earthly creatures necessarily. So Sri Aurobindo says they have a place because these artisans have seen them in their own vision, in their own intuition. They are not fantasies, they are not imaginations only. So he justifies that. Second point in another place he writes is, if we are able to bypass, after watching those beautiful, awesome photos, sculptures outside, if we are able to go quietly to the Sanctum Sanctorum, we would understand that we are leaving behind all the hustle and bustle of life and going towards the Garbhagriha. Similarly, for the upper structure as well as for the inner structure. If you go to the Hoysala temples, they are overcrowded very beautifully, lavishly. Even other temples, they are so very well crowded. But the moment we reach the Sanctum Sanctorum, after we get into the Garbhagriha, there is absolutely nothing. So it's that quietude which leaves the plenitude of life outside and becomes one with the Lord inside. So that's the representation of life our temple has brought into us, and so this is the way we need to understand our heritage of architecture. Now next one is, of course, sculpture. Incidentally, I didn't know I chose this, but a lot of other presentations I saw on the internet were having this as their first slide, so I was actually amazed that people are attracted by this very beautiful sculpting done, I don't know which temple, but this is something I felt extremely meditative. I kept on going to this slide again and again because it is amazing to see in granite something like this to have been done. The detailing, the smile, the not half closed but the closing eyes, the shyness, and yet, the confidence, everything in that, the intricacy of the design, everything that we see in this beautiful sculpture. And that's why I brought this quotation also, where he says, the dignity and beauty of the human figure in the best Indian statues cannot be excelled. But what was sought and what was achieved was not an outward naturalistic, but a spiritual and psychic beauty. So we do feel there is some mystery, not only in the Mona Lisa painting, but we have a mysterious smile of this lady also, where we just want to watch her, we just want to meditate on her. She is actually an Apsara, the structure where I picked it up from, they say she's an Apsara. But a very, very meditative, mellow, a very peace-giving kind of an Apsara, not the kind of stories that we've heard about Apsaras.
Mona Lisa is mysterious, but this is very ethereal.
Yes.
Inner bliss.
Yeah. So that's what Sri Aurobindo says, the psychic beauty. And to bring it out in stone is again something. So this is slightly different from architecture, because architecture we have a huge structure to study and understand. Now in sculpture, how do we go about understanding it? Well, of course, the Greeks again had their own standards. The Greeks told us that there is something, the sculptures have to be fine, gracious and noble. Now they would not produce anything in those days, in those early days of Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, they would not produce something that was grotesque to the eye. They would not produce something that was ugly to the eye. Whereas in India we did not hesitate. Sri Aurobindo says, even if ugliness is produced beautifully, it will have its own impact. And that's why we have the rasa called the jugupsa or the vibhatsa rasa that we have. It would not have existed if only we worshipped beauty. We worshipped, in terms of literature, he says the way Shakespeare has brought out his villains is as beautiful as he has brought out his heroines or heroes. So that beauty in Shakespeare's hand definitely is there. The beauty of literature does come out. Similarly, if we see our Rakshasas being depicted like this, so we are not shunning that part of our life. We are not shunning the grotesque or the negative part of our life. We face it right there. Here, of course, this is a sculpture done on media, and look at the beautiful details. Again in stone. Of course, perhaps it is marble, I don't know. But each of the crease of the dress, in India we do not cater to that. Lakshmi did touch upon those kind of details. But in India we do not go into the details of the wrinkles of the face or the muscle building of the human being like the David statue or all these things. What do we go into is the psychic beauty, is the final impact of what we are doing. It is not, here I think we would be interested to see if her frock has, curled rightly or not, or it is flowing, how beautifully her gown is flowing, and all those kind of details we would be mesmerized to see. But Sri Aurobindo says it stops there. It doesn't go beyond. And these are his words. It lacked spiritual depth and expression. These are Sri Aurobindo's own words. So he says they are beautiful in their own right. We should see them in their own right with their own lenses. But we should not impose Indian lenses on the Greek work, neither Greek lenses on the Indian work. Because you will not find the same thing. If we go to find this in Indian work, we will not find these detailings. These outer detailings we may not find. Of course, the previous Apsara and all that which I showed, you see the face is plain. The ornaments, which are always, they have a lot to do with ornaments. But the clothes again when they wear are simpler, not the kind of things that they are showing there. So like Lakshmi did mention that they were very honest to the nature outside, and we have been very honest to the soul inside. And the whole business of the artist is to bring out that soul element. So Sri Aurobindo here says that the more ancient sculptural art of India embodies in visible form the Upanishads threw out into inspired thought, and the Mahabharata and Ramayana portrayed by word in life. Now again, if we think of it, suddenly a picture of Mahabharata war comes into before our eyes, or Ram going to exile comes to our eyes. But then I was thinking that when Sri Aurobindo says Upanishads, is it only the stories of the Upanishads? No, not necessarily. It is the philosophy of one manifested as many, of the infinite, infinite manifested in the finite, in its all beauty, in its all delight and color. That is what the Upanishads' message is. Even Mahabharata, for that matter, it's exhilarating with life. Each living character there is superb if we take the essence of what each of these characters tell us. So they are depicting that inner life of these people. And Sri Aurobindo mentions that sculpture or even painting, they have to move from what looks physical, what appears physical, to what is there behind, into the supra-physical. That has to come out, that has to shine out. And again, it is not very easy. It's easier said than done for us, because unless we have that training partly and that training in meditation and contemplation partly, we will not be able to understand. We'll be able to appreciate by these outer parameters, but we may not be able to fully identify with these. This, of course, you see, it was taken from a museum, and sculpture, like architecture, springs from spiritual realization. Now we come here a little deeper about two things, same with architecture, painting and sculpture. Sri Aurobindo says that the artist has to inwardize, concentrate, have a spiritual realization, and then give it out, then manifest it. It's very simple to understand if we analyze that when we want to do a painting or we want to write a piece of article, what do? We just don't sit down and write. Even if we are journalists, we need a time to contemplate. We need time to assimilate those things which we want to bring out. We need to organize that in our mind. And many times when we write, it comes out something like, oh, I don't think I have written this. That feeling of me having written it is an intuitive writing, is an inspired writing. I wouldn't say intuitive, but an inspired writing. So that's something coming out in the best of harmony, best of words, best of paintings, best of colors that we want to. That is what an artist needs to bring out, and that is what we need to see in sculptures. What is it that the artist wanted to bring out perhaps, and how are we attuning ourselves with that piece of art? So it goes for all the pieces of architecture. Now I brought this purposely because I am very fond of Nataraja statue, and Sri Aurobindo has written a long description of a couple of statues, Shiva statues. So he says, what of the marvelous genius and skill in the treatment of the cosmic movement and delight of the dance of Shiva, the success with which the posture of every limb is made to bring out the rhythm of the significance, the rapturous intensity and abandon of the movement itself, and yet the just restraint and the intensity of motion, the subtle variation of each element of the single theme in the seizing idea of these master sculptors. This is really, classically also, Nataraja statue has been studied abundantly because it is one of the most fascinating, like we have Mona Lisa's smile. This is one of the most intriguing structures intuitively created by a human being. Because of the poise of Lord Shiva, because of the dance posture, because of the angular, adjustments in this structure. So a lot of scientific studies also have taken place in this field, as well as what is this philosophical significance. They say even the Panchamahabhutas are present in this figure. So you see a lot of philosophical, psychological, religious, occult, all those significances are there, and yet it keeps mesmerizing us. It continues to enchant us every time we see this statue. So, and of course, Sri Aurobindo uses this, the giant dance of Shiva toward the past in Savitri. So, there is a reason. Why I'm mentioning that is this dance of Shiva somewhere has gone deep into Sri Aurobindo's own vocabulary, in his own imagery. And we do see that, the significance of this dance, the significance of this posture. And very significantly, Sri Aurobindo does mention here that there is a movement and a restraint. That something coming in a bronze or a stone is astounding. We can't imagine what it would be to, at the same time, have the quality of movement and the quality of restraint in the same art form. Because at another place, Sri Aurobindo does mention that poetry is all about the flow, and architecture or sculpture is all about the stillness. So he does contrast poetry and art, the visual art. But then here we see both poetry and the visual art coming together in this poise of Lord Shiva. Now for sculpture, I have pointed out these three of how do we perceive unity. Is the divine self in us is the theme, Sri Aurobindo says. Divine self is us is the theme. The body made of form of the soul is its idea and its secret. So there is the idea and the body, and there is what we are bringing out from ourselves, if we can do that while we are seeing a sculpture. Soul realization is its method of creation, and soul realization must be the way of our response and understanding. I think I can't speak anything beyond this, because soul realization each one of us have to do individually, but he has laid the path to it. He has given us the way to it. Now next we come to painting. Painting, of course, Sri Aurobindo says is, he doesn't say it's easier, but it has much more flow, because we have the brush and the colors and the tonalities and all that we can do with painting, which the sculptor cannot do. He, by the virtue of his medium itself, he is restricted. And again, it's hats off to those sculptors who did all that they did in those beautiful granite structures, because one chip off gone wrong, the entire piece is destroyed. Whereas in painting, you can still hide, we can still make do, we can put another color and maybe perhaps make something out of it. But in architecture and sculpture, it's very difficult. However, this again painting, the chapter Sri Aurobindo wrote because there was an objection raised by this Mr. William Archer that India did not have good enough paintings. And but Sri Aurobindo says, of course, it's unfortunate because painting is a very short-lived art. It doesn't, the paints evaporate or they get destroyed. So even if nobody is destroying nature, they get faded. So still, he says, whatever is remaining is of great value and of great quality. Of course, he refers a lot to the Ajanta paintings, and then Bengal Renaissance. Of course, I have brought these. But it's similar to sculpture. All Indian art is a throwing out of a certain profound self-vision formed by going within to find out secret significance of form and appearance. Here again we have to remember one thing, that acculturation of oneself into that to receive intuition. Because in the ashram we know a lot of painters who were not trained technically. But the mother, through her power and getting to them through intuitions, they've created very, very beautiful pictures. So it is not just about technique. It is about technique. One has to have technique, there's no doubt about it. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo do say that we need to know the technique, but technique alone is not enough. In fact, that reminds me of one of the poems of Robert Browning, which in one of his poems, Andrea del Sarto, he says that the protagonist in the poem says, you know, I have these 4 great painters in Raphael and Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, 2-3 great painters in front of me, and I can find fault in their technique. I can tell you that this is not right in their painting, but still, and I being the most perfect of them all, I lack the soul. And those are the people who have the soul, and that's why their paintings are what they are today. So that was so thrilling. When I read that, that got stuck in my mind that yes, even the Western painters, they were after something deeper. And of course, in India it was pronounced, we were given the milieu, we were given the philosophy, the religion, the spirituality, the background, all was there. So the acculturation into receiving intuition is very important. I have seen quite a few videos on YouTube where a lot of people have been still imitating nature in many different ways. So why is it that Van Gogh becomes a different figure for us? Because he has done something different from what the nature, although depicted nature, but he has done something different, a lot of experimentation. We have seen Raza's painting, beautiful depiction of the Mother Earth, the very core of the earth that he is trying to depict. So there is something intuitive, there is a constant search in painting, and that search, Sri Aurobindo says, if it's an inner search, it will be depicted in the painting also. And this inner search, in fact, when he talks about the Buddha painting, he has written almost a page of analysis of Gautam Buddha's this painting, the Adoration group of paintings. A full page on what each of the line and the curve and the mudra, everything that symbolizes, that looks whatever is there in this painting. Of course, I've enhanced it a little to bring up the colors, but Sri Aurobindo does mention of how the Yashoda and Rahul, their hand postures, the smile of Buddha's face and the gesture of the wife and the child. The difference of the height between the two, what is it that the artist is trying to depict? Why is it that unlike the previous other paintings of the Western times, here we don't have a single crease of the cloth that Buddha is wearing? Because Sri Aurobindo says here the artist was focused on an inner expression. His idea was not to distract us with the details of the crease of his cloth. His idea was to show the magnanimity, the realization, the enlightenment of the Buddha and the child and the mother, or the child and the wife turning towards that enlightened soul. So that is the gesture, and it is so beautiful. If you ever read this explanation, it's extremely marvelous how Sri Aurobindo has gone into each and every detail of this painting and spoken about it. So, in fact, this quotation which I have put along with it is, he begins from within, sees in his soul the thing he wishes to express or interpret, and tries to discover the right line, color and design of his intuition, which, when it appears on the physical ground, is not a just and reminding reproduction of the line, color and design of the physical nature, but much rather what seems to us a psychical transmutation of the natural figure. This is where I think all our Ajanta paintings or a lot of older paintings have been trying to do. That they inwardize, there is in art or in poetry, there is always this movement of taking something from outside, inwardizing it, assimilating it, and again giving it out in a form which exceeds what we have seen. If it's again an imitation, it doesn't take us too far. But even if a rose is depicted in a manner which exceeds the natural rose, it will have a greater appeal. It will have a deeper appeal, not just a greater appeal. So Sri Aurobindo is very particular about the psychical transmutation of our physical experience, of our physical vision. So in painting, of course, he does mention that vision is of very much importance, of what in all the visual arts certainly, and even in poetry he says vision is of great importance, but here specifically in this chapter he does mention that he has to begin from within, sees in his soul. So there has to be a dipping into the soul. I am sure the painter who did this, he would have visualized or had seen intuitively the Buddha in this magnanimous enlightened form, and then only he could reproduce it in this way. So I have nothing more to say, but this inward look is what Sri Aurobindo has given us as a parameter. Now, how do these things combine to us? Of course, there's one small quotation here. Indian painting, like Indian architecture and sculpture, appeals through the physical and the psychical to another spiritual vision from which the artist worked, and it is only when this is no less awakened in us than the aesthetic sense that it can be appreciated in all the depth of its significance. So this is for us who are into appreciating and not just creating. Most of us, we just go as tourists, but when we go with this idea that there is something deeper that it is going to reveal, it might reveal something deeper, then maybe we'll be benefited. But before that, we have to, as tourists, we have to train ourselves into it. And the last unifying factor, of course, here I brought. In his early cultural writings, Sri Aurobindo has written a lot about these three aspects: love, beauty, and delight. And this is where I think we can bring in all the three: architecture, sculpture, and painting, where the love of the sculptor towards his art, or the divine he is going to carve, or he is going to paint, or the temple he is going to consecrate, or even just for the love of his livelihood that he is doing. That love is very important, because only when we love something, we do it with all our heart. Similarly, beauty. Beauty, as Sunena was telling us that time, and we've been talking about the importance of beauty. Sri Aurobindo again has written a full article on how beauty impacts the national life of the life of a nation. There also he says it is the highest service that art can do to educate us towards beauty, how to have beauty. And he says, not overcrowding of things in a house. Your house cannot become a museum, he says. But even a day-to-day activity of keeping our furniture, choice of furniture, everything he says can be beautified, and that will culture us into something. So he gives a lot of importance to beauty. And when there is love and beauty, delight follows. There's an automatic joy. So when he here says God as beauty, Sri Krishna in Vrindavan, Shyam Sundar is not only beauty, he is also love. So he is bringing us this example in terms of saying that we cannot isolate love, beauty, delight, good, harmony, unity. All these are not separate elements. These are all together. But he of course names three of them as quite categorically. So that's why I brought this. He's also love, and without perfect love there cannot be perfect beauty, and without perfect beauty there cannot be perfect delight. So that love, beauty, delight in art come together. He has given different parameters for poetry, so I'm not completing those here because that is slightly different. But I think that can also go into it. Truth, beauty, delight, love and spirit, and we can add love to it. So that is there, but what we began with in the beginning of our seminars today was one aspect which she started with was harmony. All problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony. And when we talk of unity, when we talk of beauty, delight, love, one cornerstone again, which I felt in Sri Aurobindo's all works, I think unity and harmony would go together. Not uniformity and harmony, but unity and harmony would go together. Unity bringing us the higher dimension and harmony in all that, the objective reality of the world, if that is in harmony, if the temple structure is in harmony with the surroundings, call it unity, call it harmony, might be the same. So that becomes one of the guiding principles of our perception of what we are, how we can see our own cultural heritage, our own monuments and temples. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Shrutiji, for presenting beautiful observations on unity in Indian art. So we have the last speech by Lalit Barmaji. He was supposed to attend, but yesterday night he mentioned that he had some urgent meetings. So Pradeep, shall we share that recording of Lalit Barmaji?
Pranam to all who are here and the organizers, and my pranams also to the Heritage Festival. I'm grateful that you have invited me to speak on what is called sharing cultures. You know that I have been doing that activity for several years now. And the first sentence that comes to my mind before I even share something with you is a line from Savitri which says, "Imperfect is the joy which is not shared by all." Sharing culture becomes extremely important, especially for all of us. It reminds me of the lines from the Life Divine which says, "Sharing the earliest formula of wisdom promises to be also its last. God, light, freedom, and immortality." Now, when we share through programs and events that I regularly do, I keep three things in mind. My first thing is to, through the program, which is definitely entertainment, is to take a clear cognizance of our culture, and in the process, the first step is to educate the uneducated. The second step, simultaneously, is that in the surroundings and the gathering, there are some who are already educated. So the same event at the same time should also help elevate the ones who are already educated. And the third step is what to do with already the educated and the elevated is to illumine them. So the third step is to illumine the educated. Now, what is the role of India and India's heritage in this? I will read out from, again, Sri Aurobindo Swaraj, where Sri Aurobindo writes, "India is the guru of the nations, the physician of the human soul in its profounder maladies. She is destined once more to new mold the life of the world and restore the peace of human beings." If this in some way becomes the role, this being a heritage festival, we have in our heritage things that we have to share to the world. And if Sri Aurobindo has written this so many years back, that as the guru of the world, we need to share the best that we have, I would also like to read not only what India can do, but also the dangers. Again, this is the passage which I had also read when I was in the Parliament House, installing the Sri Aurobindo statue. This passage says, "There are deeper issues for India herself, since by following certain tempting directions, she may conceivably become a nation like many others, evolving an opulent industry and commerce, a powerful organization of social and political life, an immense military strength, practicing power politics and a high degree of success, guarding and extending zealously her gains and her interests, dominating even a large part of the world, but in the apparently magnificent progression, forfeiting its swadharma, losing its soul. Then ancient India and her spirit might disappear altogether, and we would have only one more nation like the others, and that would be a great neither to the world nor to us. It would be a tragic irony of fate if India were to throw away her spiritual heritage at the very moment when the rest of the world here is more and more turning towards her spiritual help and a saving light. This might not and will surely not happen. At this point, sharing once again becomes extremely important of culture. We are a very diverse country. Diverseness is not a cause of disunity, but actually to the contrary, it is a cause for unifying. This is an example that one has to share to the world. I have been to many symposiums where people recently have started talking about superpowers. There are military superpowers, there are academic superpowers, there are social superpowers, there are industrial superpowers. But whenever the talk of India comes, they always talk as India as a cultural superpower. For this to happen, there are three things which I think are very important. The first, you need to be open to the call. The second, you will then probably be open for a revelation. And then the third is obviously transformation. For us to be able to share the real wisdom, we need to be a transformed nation. I would like to end with the two sentences of the poem of Sri Aurobindo from his poem called Transformation. What Sri Aurobindo has written about the soul of India and how it becomes so important for us to be conscious of that. One sees the soul of India ready to enter into the fullness of her heritage, and the hour of an unparalleled greatness approaching, when from her soil shall go forth the call and the leading to the highest destinies of the race. But before I do that, I would like to also share that the world is actually looking out for solutions, and nothing really has worked, neither extraordinary social standings or administrative purposes, nor the planning, nor the mind. They are all looking out for something which is deeper than just mental arrangements of life. What is that? That is obviously India's spiritual heritage. I remember when we had seen this beautiful presentation made by some on the genius of India. One of the key lines that came were, take the wisdom from our past, use the latest technology in such a manner that you can create an original future. I'm not going word by word, but I'm giving the gist and essence of what the message had to give. With this, I like to end by the two sentences of the key poem for me called Transformation. It says at the end, what we have to become so that we can share our culture, is that our body, my body is God's happy and living tool. My spirit, a vast sun of deathless light. I want to end with this and really want to thank all those who are participating in the Heritage Festival as well as the Symposium. Our heritage, at least in this Chatur Yoga, our heritage has a great role to play, and we have to become conscious of it. And the one way to become conscious is to transform ourselves and become people conscious of what is available before we can actually share it. Thank you so much.
There's a story of Nandalal Bose, his biography written by one of his students, who, when he went to Taj Mahal, he went there and he did not feel it. Everybody had said it's so beautiful, so beautiful. He still could not see it. He still could not see it. He was so mesmerized by the marble, by the beauty of the material itself. As an artist, he could just not see beyond the beauty of the material. And then he went to Sher Shah Suri's tomb, which he thought was a much grander structure than Taj Mahal. Until he came back to Taj Mahal again later on a full moon night. And in the light of the full moon, the marble went in the background and whatever was the inner beauty of the structure came out. So he said it was the moon that made the unity, that brought the unity that was missing in the Taj Mahal itself. So it's so important, that unity that Aurobindo emphasizes so much in Indian art. And when I read this little incident, I was very touched by the first picture you had of Modera, because that one structure really signifies and it's not a temple as such. I mean, there is a temple, but there is so much more around it. And so the unity of Indian architecture really stands out in that one structure. And it is so beautifully preserved still. So thank God for whoever, the Solankis, who made that. So it's very marvelous. So I just thought I'd mention that little incident.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
How nature can also
suggest, like, Nandana Bose.
Yeah, because probably the architect of Taj Mahal also envisioned that or saw that in a full moon night.
Yes,
then only I guess the marble would go in the background.
You have seen it like that?
Not really. Yeah, and I think these days they don't even allow on full moon night.
So it was really a wonderful session to listening from Velu Didi, Lakshmi ji and Shruti ji, and Dr. Lalit Burma's views on sharing the cultural heritage. I will share the videos. It was really a wonderful session when we talk about Aurobindo's views on Indian culture, especially Dr. Velu Didi mentioned the foundations of Sanatan Dharma, like referring to the Vedas and giving many examples. The ultimate goal is to find the Brahmans, and she mentioned about the different Ekamshat Vipra Bhuta Vadanti. The Rigved depicts Agnim Indram Varunam Agni Ahoratha Dibhyaha Sa Suvarna Garutma Ekamshat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, but the why speaks indifferently. Lakshmiji mentioned about the life and the divinity, giving the examples of the traditional viewpoints, referring to the Chatu Ashramas, Chatu Varnas, and the 4 aspects of human life, and how he has touched the different aspects of life to feel the divinity. It was really a wonderful lecture to listen from you. And Dr. Shrutiji about the unity in Indian art, so by giving many examples through the Indian iconography, the visuals, and the paintings, things. The last speech was, I will share the details. I have listened to him. It was a 7 minutes speech by Dr. Lalit Burma. He especially emphasizing on the sharing of the cultural heritage, like giving examples of many dynasties and how through the intercultural understanding we can create a better world.